Hi everybody, it's me Waddles. Today, I wanted to make a quick video about something that I think needs a little bit more appreciation. This thing is new, it's brand new, and it's basically amazing. I'm kind of obsessed with it, not gonna lie. Now, what is that thing? Copper? No. Axolotl? Yeah, but no. Of course, it's the moss block. The moss block not only looks really good, but it actually has a couple really interesting and cool mechanics tied to it, and I've come up with a couple ideas of my own. Today, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. This video might end up being a little bit shorter than normal, but I hope you still like it. Just a warning here, I'm kind of obsessed with this block. Maybe it's unhealthy, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say, but just so you know. Anyways, you know what to do. Likes up 1000k, let's go. First things first is the new block. This thing right here, moss block. Look at how good it looks. It looks really good. This texture, definitely planty. The texture also matches grass like insanely well, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Now, as of this snapshot, the luscious snapshot that added this block into the game, actually, this thing doesn't generate anywhere. Once cave update generation is actually added in, you'll be able to find this block generating in the lush caves biome, which definitely makes sense. This is for sure a luscious looking block. Look at that thing. Did I say how good it looks yet? No? Well, it looks really good. So in survival mode, eventually, you'll find this thing generating in the lush caves if you want it, which you definitely do. Hopefully, it'll generate in more places, but lush caves for sure. Now, this block mines very quickly with the hand. I mean, check that out. Look at that. That's kind of insane. But things can actually get a little bit faster. If you want to mine this block faster, grab an axe. Axes are actually the tool to mine this thing, which is really weird to me. You would think this would be the hoe, but no, the axe. The axe is the tool that you use. Insta mining is cool, and good news, without any beacon effects, like just a plain old netherite axe, no efficiency, nothing like that. Look at this. Insta mine. This block is insta mineable, like right off the bat. Now, of course, the main use for this moss block is probably going to be decoration, followed by farming, but let's say you didn't want to do either of those things for some reason, like you're just a really crazy person. Well, you can walk up to a composter with the moss block and put it in. When you use a moss block on a composter, it has a 65% chance of raising that composter fill level to the next level. So, it's an option here. It's not a good option, but it's an option. You can turn this stuff into bone meal, which is nice, but you should probably get the bone meal a different way, because bone meal works really well with moss blocks. But before we talk about bone mealing, let's talk about what else you could do with this thing. Let's say you had a crafting table. Most people usually have a crafting table. Then let's say you have a lot of moss blocks, like maybe a whole inventory full, because this stuff is absolutely amazing. But actually, you would only need two, because moss carpet is crafted just like this, just like normal carpet with wool, but this time moss instead. Now, moss carpet, what is it? Well, it is what its name is. It's carpet, but it's actually not carpet, it's actually moss. So you might be wondering, compared to normal carpet, how different is it? Well, it's actually not very different at all. The layer, the height, is exactly the same, at least as of right now. Now, unfortunately, there is only one moss carpet, one moss layer. If you try and stack them, they'll stack just like carpet stack, which is kind of a bummer. What do I mean? Well, this is what I mean. I feel like this is how moss should behave. Like, you could stack this stuff, and it could grow, kind of like snow. Like, how cool would that be? Like, different moss layers sitting around in an area? That would be, like, amazing for detailing, and it would be really cool. So, hopefully, maybe. But for now, it's literally moss carpet. Another cool thing about this block, as predicted, this block goes on the land. Yep, that definitely makes sense. Same with the moss carpet. But the moss block can also actually go under the water, and nothing will happen to it. Like, you can place it down there and have, like, a mossy surface, which is really cool. Bad news, though, moss carpet, it does not work under the water. It breaks instantly. It can't be waterlogged. It can't be placed under the water. Bone meal. Earlier on, I mentioned something about bone meal being good with moss blocks. Yeah, that's definitely the case. There are a few different things that you can do with bone meal and moss blocks. Of course, the first thing, bone meal the moss block. Now check this out. When I bone mealed that, I got grass, tall grass, moss layer actually, it grew, more on that in a second, and then the azalea bush. So, the mysterious azalea bush, how do you get it in survival? Well, it's quite simple, you see. Go in creative mode, get a moss block, place it down, and then bone meal it, and then you can actually grow these azalea bushes, same with the moss layers, and grass, which is really cool. Now, I've been running some tests. Flowers, they don't come from this stuff. You will never get a flower from bone mealing the moss block. Only grasses, layers, and bushes. But these bushes can be flowering bushes sometimes, which is cool. So, when you bone meal moss blocks, moss layers, yeah, you can get these things. Like, they literally grow, which to me only adds to the case of making this stuff more like snow, where it can actually stack and layer up and grow. It's not really carpet, is it? No, it's like a moss layer. This definitely, it should be like stackable, like snow, please. It would be amazing, please. I would ask for nothing else. The update could be finished. Forget everything else. So the 2 brand new azalea bushes, we still don't know very much about them. They're pretty mysterious, but we do know that you can grow these things on moss blocks, which definitely makes sense. The moss block and these azalea bushes are all Lush Caves features. Now, I'm not sure if this one right here is a bug right now, but check this out. If we put a moss block down right there and then we bone meal the moss block, look at this. Azalea bushes, moss layers, everything like that, they all grow around this thing, but on the grass blocks, actually. It's really, really interesting. Now, every time I've done this, still no flowers, the same plants as normal, just kind of weird. That seems like it probably shouldn't work like that, but maybe it does. Bone meal and moss block, it doesn't end there. Definitely not, that would be too normal. Check this out. So moss block in the center, stone, gravel, sand, dirt, granite, andesite, diorite, right? Yeah, right, okay. Let's now maybe, I don't know, like bone meal? Did you see that? Did you see that? What happened there? The moss overtook all of those blocks. It just grew all over these things. You see, I told you these aren't carpets. These are layers. It grew all over those blocks. That's crazy. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing. If I'm under the water and I bone meal this moss block, that's not going to happen. Just seagrass, so it doesn't seem to work like that under here. But over here on the land, definitely. Absolutely, that stuff can turn over to moss. So this one is kind of interesting. I've been testing this one out for a little while, and the shape, it doesn't seem to necessarily always be exactly the same or consistent. So bone meal that, look at that, that's like a lot of moss, and that might have even gone farther. Then this one was like that way, this one went that way, same shape but turned. It's interesting. So yeah, moss, it can actually override sand, dirt, andesite, diorite, granite, stone, and gravel. If you bone meal this stuff near any of those blocks could actually turn over to a moss block. And when they turn over, the weird thing here, when they turn over, they can be mined by hand, like really, really quickly, which is kind of strange, not gonna lie. It was granite before, and now I can just break it with my hand, but I mean, fair enough. Moss block bone meal. The interesting relationship does not end there, though. So check this out. These flowers, I can bone meal these. This is normal. That would make sense. But these saplings up here, these, I actually can't bone meal any of these. No matter how much bone meal I use, no matter what blocks are around this stuff, like if this were in the middle of a field, like let's say we had this oak sapling, oak saplings grow like literally anywhere, we put it right there and bone mealed it. There's no trick to this, it just doesn't work. And that's going to be the case, of course, for the giant trees too. If the small trees can't grow, why would the big trees be able to grow? Now, this is a little bit confusing. Some people are calling this a bug. I personally, though, really would love this to not be a bug. See, when I'm doing decorating, I really always love the idea of placing saplings down as small decorational plants. The problem, saplings, they kind of like to grow. I've always thought that it would be really cool to have some sort of system in the game where you could place saplings down and they wouldn't grow. And this system right here, moss blocks, oh, this is amazing. I mean, think about it. Would a tree be able to actually grow on moss? Well, maybe. I'm not a scientist, but technically dirt would probably be best, right? So, moss block saplings not growing? Please, devs, please, listen, please hear me out. Leave this in the game. This is amazing. I really hope this isn't a bug. I hope this is behaving as intended because it's so cool. I mean, finally, we can actually decorate with saplings without having to worry about them growing. That's amazing. So in terms of functionality, mechanics, bone meal relationship, that's actually going to be just about it. The moss block, what is it going to be best for? Well, honestly, beside farming, terraforming, this thing is going to work amazingly in any type of like green, overgrown plant area. I mean, look at this stuff. Compared to grass, it matches like so perfectly. This basically, essentially, is like a solid grass block. This matches so well. But this is in the plains biome. Let's say we were maybe we were over in the taiga biome. Unfortunately, here in the taiga biome, it's not going to match as well. It's still going to look good, and we could definitely use it, but it doesn't match very well, and that's where another idea of mine comes in. So leaves are a plant. Yeah, definitely. Check this out. If I were to place these leaves in the plains biome, they would look like this over here. Then, if I were to place them in the river, they would look like this in the middle, and then finally, in the taiga, they get a little bit colder looking. Personally, I feel like moss should kind of behave the same. I mean, after all, moss is a plant. It's very, very similar to grass, kind of like leaves, so why not? Why not have it on like a color gradient so then in every single biome, moss kind of blends into the grass? I think that would be really, really cool, and it would definitely make the stuff a lot more useful in different biomes. Remember that in the cave update, the new caves are going to be biomes, so this wouldn't actually affect the coloration of moss in the lush caves. It would just change it in the other biomes. If you needed any more convincing, check this out. Let's say we're in the Badlands biome, like maybe we were building our base here. Grass looks like that, leaves look like that. Moss, what? Huh? Why? It doesn't make sense. They should definitely match together, for sure. And at that point, same with the moss carpet. I mean, moss layer. The moss layer should definitely match too. These things need to be on a biome color gradient. There's no other option. Next up, moss. So think about it. Moss, naturally, it kind of grows in the darkness, right? Or at least that's how I believe it works. Yep, okay. For the sake of this example, it does. So, this moss is placed down in the dark forest, which I actually just learned is technically called the dark forest, and not dark oak forest. My mind is blown. Anyways, it's placed down in this dark forest, so let's say the light level was really, really dim here. Like, maybe, like, I don't know, less than 4. I feel like, personally, in the dark, like in the really, really dark, moss should maybe spread. Now, we're talking a dark light level, like a light level less than, like I said, 4 or something like that, so it doesn't just overwhelm everything. But it definitely should naturally spread. Now, the spreading mechanic should probably only work onto blocks that it can overtake. So something like dirt, sand, gravel, stuff like that, so it doesn't end up overwhelming your world. But in the darkness, I would argue that these moss layers should actually grow on top of grass too. Maybe this could be based off of the moss block. Let's say this moss block is the source block, then maybe moss layers could grow anywhere within like 3 blocks of every direction of this thing, and they would just slowly grow over time, again in darkness, only in darkness, and these layers would just grow on top of the blocks. It wouldn't overtake anything. It would just be like sitting there, and you could come back later and just dig it out, remove it, and go use it for something else. And technically speaking here, if this was behaving weirdly, maybe this could be turned off in certain biomes. I don't know if that could be done, but maybe it just doesn't work like that in the caves for whatever reason. It only works like that on the surface because I don't know, maybe there's less air in the caves. I don't know. It would be cool though. At the least here, I feel like moss should definitely be able to spread onto things like dirt and sand and gravel, the things that it can spread onto. Maybe not the stones on its own, just over time, like grass does, like mycelium does. So I like the whole moss overtaking stones. That's really cool. It's really interesting, and in my opinion, it's pretty realistic. So let's go ahead and do this. We bone meal it, and the stone, it was just normal stone, and it turned into moss blocks, and then this is where it gets a little weird. So I can just mine the moss block like that. Of course, it's a moss block now. That's how that's gonna work, but it's a little weird if you think about it. I feel like this could be done better with maybe the help of the shears. So imagine this. You walk up to a moss block that was originally stone, like you would have to know somehow, and then you use the shears on it. Then what would happen? Well, a couple different moss carpets would spit out, maybe like 3 of them, just onto the ground, and then this would be a normal stone again. We just sheared the moss off of the stone. We got some moss layers. They fell down. We cut them off, you know, and it's stone again. Having different moss blocks have different mining speeds, yeah, in terms of the game, that probably doesn't make sense. That would be a little bit weird. So I'm not saying that should happen, but shears, being able to shear off blocks that were overtaken by moss, I think that would be really, really cool. And maybe even the normal moss, like the moss that generates, you shear that stuff, and like it always turns to something, like always turns to stone or something. I don't know. I feel like this mechanic right here would potentially be another really interesting mechanic tied to the moss block, and think about it, bone mealing the moss and it spreads onto something, and then you have shears that shear the moss in a dispenser, maybe automatic moss farm, and then maybe you could actually combine those moss carpets into a solid block eventually. Automatic moss farm. I love it. That's how it would be done, and I feel like it would fit into the game pretty well. The moss block. I am really, really happy with this block. This block is way more interesting than I thought it ever would have been. This thing has a lot of really, really interesting mechanics tied to it. There are definitely at least a couple more mechanics that could be added to the game tied to the moss block to make this block even more interesting. What do you think though? My concepts, do you like them? Do you agree? The moss block, do you like it or do you love it? Let me know down in the comments below. I hope you liked today's video. If you did and you haven't yet, make sure you leave a like, please. It helps out huge time. And if you haven't yet, subscribe today. It's free. If you're an absolute unit, an overachiever, if you've already done both of those things, then join the notification gang. All you have to do is tap the bell. Today, big thank you to my patrons, 4Gay99 and Divins. Thank you so much for the support. Until next time, it's been me, your boy, Moss is the best, 68 here. Have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow.